Water and Honor, a story of the Apache people and the frontier West. Part 1. The Well. Somewhere between the canyon ridges and the endless scrubland, where the wind carried dust instead of rain and the sun hammered the earth like a blacksmith's fist, a man found something he wasn't looking for. Corbin Thorne walked toward his well that afternoon, pulling his hat low against the glare, when he saw her collapsed against the wooden fence. A young woman, taller than any he'd ever seen, nearly 6 feet by his reckoning, with long dark hair matted with dirt and dried blood. Her skin was a warm copper brown, the color of the canyon walls at dusk, and her face held the sharp, high-boned features common among the Apache people of the Southwest. She wore a tunic and skirt of softened deer hide, the kind that Apache women spent long hours tanning, scraping, and working until it moved like cloth. Intricate beadwork decorated the hem of her garment, small glass and shell beads in patterns of blue, white, and turquoise that each carried meaning in her culture. A single eagle feather was woven into her dark braid. Her moccasins were knee-high, the soles thick enough to cross the sharpest stone terrain. Every detail of her dress announced who she was, a person of the day, the Apache, the people. Her lips were cracked white with thirst. When he offered the ladle of water from his well, she looked at him with dark eyes that held more suspicion than gratitude. For generations, her people had learned what it meant when a white man offered something with open hands. The history was written in blood and broken promises. But the thirst was real. She drank. 3 times she drank, each long pull slower and more deliberate than the last. When she was done, she stood, towering, silent, and stared at him as if memorizing every line of his face. Then she turned and walked into the hills without a single word. Corbin watched her disappear into the heat shimmer, thinking that would be the end of it. He was wrong.
Part 2. The Rancher Alone. Corbin Thorne had lived on this land long enough to know when something was about to go wrong. The ranch sat in a shallow valley where the grass grew thin and pale, and the nearest neighbor was 2 days' ride south. He'd chosen isolation on purpose. No questions, no trouble. Just cattle, a few horses, and the kind of silence that let a man forget what he'd left behind. He wasn't running from anything in particular, just from the noise of people who thought they knew better than they did. He'd seen enough of that back east, men in clean boots making decisions about land they'd never walked, about people they'd never met. That evening, after the Apache girl vanished into the hills, Corbin went about his work the same as always. He fed the horses, checked the fence line where the wood had started to rot, fixed a gate hinge that had been squeaking for weeks. But his mind kept circling back to her. The way she looked at him, not afraid, not grateful either, just aware. Like she'd been taking his measure and decided something he wasn't privy to. He told himself it didn't matter. People passed through this territory all the time. Prospectors, drifters, Apache moving between camps and trading posts further west. The Apache were not a single nation, but a confederation of related bands, Chiricahua, Mescalero, Chicoria, Western Apache, each moving through vast territories they had known for centuries. Semi-nomadic by nature and necessity, they followed game, water, and the turning of the seasons, carrying their lives with them. She'd gotten lost, gotten hurt, and now she was gone. That was that. But that night, lying on the narrow cot in his cabin, Corbin couldn't shake the feeling that the air had changed. The horses were restless in the corral, their hooves scraping the dirt with nervous rhythm. Once the bay gelding let out a sharp whinny that cut through the dark. Corbin sat up, listening. Nothing followed, just the wind pushing against the walls and the distant call of something hunting in the hills. He lay back down, staring at the rough-hewn ceiling beams. Tomorrow, everything would go back to normal. He was still telling himself that when the sun rose.
Part 3. The Army on the Ridge. Corbin stepped outside at first light, pulling his suspenders over his shoulders and squinting against the glare. The sky was pale blue, fading to white at the edges. The valley stretched before him, scrub grass and red rock formations dotting the landscape like the bones of buried giants. And then he saw them. At first he thought his eyes were playing tricks, shadows on the ridgeline. But shadows didn't move like that. Shadows didn't sit on horseback in perfect stillness, watching. He counted 10, then 20, then stopped counting. They lined the ridge to the north, the hillside to the east, the slope that ran down to the dry creek bed to the west. Everywhere he looked, more Apache warriors on horseback, spears and rifles visible even at this distance, the feathers tied to lance shafts trembling in the morning wind. They wore buckskin shirts and leggings dyed in earth tones, ochre, brown, the red-brown of desert clay. Several had painted their faces in bold geometric patterns of black and white, the sacred markings of ceremony and conflict. Their horses, lean, sure-footed animals, bred and trained in rough terrain, stood without fidgeting. Rider and horse were one, the way only a lifetime on horseback could produce. They weren't advancing, they weren't making noise. They were simply there, surrounding his ranch like a noose pulled tight. Corbin's hand moved instinctively toward the rifle leaning against the doorframe, but he stopped himself. What good would one rifle do against an army? He stepped into the yard. The horses in the corral were pressed against the far fence, heads high, nostrils flared. They could smell it too, something ancient and immediate, the scent of danger carried on the dry wind. Corbin scanned the ridgeline again, trying to understand what he was seeing. This wasn't a raid. Apache raiders moved fast, struck hard, and disappeared like smoke. That was their art, guerrilla warfare refined over centuries, a swift and devastating mobility that had humbled Spanish armies, Mexican cavalry, and U.S. soldiers alike. What surrounded him now was something else entirely. This was deliberate, measured. It was a message. His throat tightened. He thought about the girl, the water, the way she'd looked at him before she left. And then, as if summoned by the thought, movement caught my eye. A single rider groped from the group on the northern ridge and began descending the slope. Slow, controlled. The horse picked its way down the rocky incline with a precision that spoke of decades in the saddle. Corbin didn't move, didn't reach for the rifle, didn't run. He just stood in the middle of his yard, watching, wondering if this was the day his luck finally ran out.
The rider stopped 50 feet away. He was an older man, perhaps in his 60s, his face deeply lined by years of sun, wind, and the weight of command. His skin was the same warm copper brown as the girl's, but weathered darker, marked by a life lived entirely outdoors. His long black hair, streaked through with silver, was tied back and decorated with a single red-painted bone bead. He wore a buckskin shirt adorned with small brass trade beads and geometric embroidery along the shoulders, the kind of careful craftsmanship that marked a man of standing. No war paint covered his face. He didn't need it. Authority radiated from him like heat from canyon stone. Behind him, more riders appeared, dozens of them flanking, watching. Corbin swallowed hard. The silence stretched out thick and suffocating. Then the old warrior raised one hand, not in greeting, not in threat. He simply held it there, palm open, waiting for something Corbin couldn't name. His heart hammered against his ribs. Whatever was about to happen had been decided long before he woke this morning. The old warrior lowered his hand slowly. Then he dismounted. His movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial, the kind of motion that comes not from performance, but from a deep understanding of what a moment requires. He walked forward 10 paces and stopped, waiting. Corbin forced himself to breathe. This was a test. It had to be. If they wanted him dead, he'd already be dead. They'd had all night to burn him out or put an arrow through the window. Instead, they'd waited for sunrise, waited for him to see them. That meant something. Corbin stepped forward, matching the distance, 10 paces. Then he stopped too. They stood facing each other across 50 feet of dusty ground, two men from different worlds, connected by a single ladle of water. The warrior's face was weathered like old leather, his eyes black and unreadable. He carried no weapon in his hands, but a knife hung at his belt and a rifle was strapped to his horse. Corbin kept his own hands visible and still. Neither man spoke. The language barrier was absolute. For a long moment, nothing happened.
The warriors on the ridges remained still as carved stone. A hawk circled overhead, oblivious to the tension below. Then the old warrior raised his hand again, but this time he pointed, not at Corbin, at the well. Corbin's stomach dropped. The well, the water, the girl. The warrior's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He turned his head and called out sharply in his own language. A ripple of movement ran through the warriors on the eastern ridge. They parted, creating a gap, and through that gap, a single rider appeared.
Corbin's breath caught. It was her, the girl from yesterday, but she looked different now. Her dark hair was braided and decorated with small turquoise and shell beads. She wore clean deer-hide clothing, the tunic carefully painted with small diamond shapes along the collar, symbols her people used to honor the mountain spirits, the Gons, the powerful supernatural protectors of the Apache world. Around her neck hung a necklace of turquoise and silver, each stone carefully selected for its color and weight. She sat straight-backed on a painted pony, her spine erect with the natural posture of someone who had grown up in the saddle. Even from a distance, her height was striking. She had to be close to 6 feet tall, maybe more. She stood out even among the warriors. She rode down the slope with the same controlled grace as the old warrior. When she reached the valley floor, she didn't stop at a respectful distance. She rode straight to Corbin, stopped 10 feet away, close enough that he could see her face clearly in the morning light. She looked at him with the same measuring gaze as before. Then she spoke. Her English was halting but clear. "You give water." It wasn't a question. It was a statement, an acknowledgement of a fact that Corbin was beginning to understand carried a great deal of weight. "Yes," he said. She glanced at the old warrior, then back at Corbin. "You not know who?" "No," said Corbin. "You were hurt, needed help." Something flickered in her dark eyes, surprise maybe, or the first edge of respect. She turned and spoke rapidly to the old warrior in Apache, a flowing, complex language built around verbs where the action and its relationship to the world carried more meaning than nouns ever could. The old warrior listened without expression, then responded with a single word. The girl turned back to Corbin. "My father say, you brave or fool." Corbin's throat went dry. Father. The old warrior was her father, which meant he was the chief, which meant this girl was not just any Apache. She was the daughter of the man who commanded 300 warriors. "I didn't know," Corbin said quietly. "That why you live." Her tone was flat, factual. "Man who knows, he tries to get reward. You give water because thirsty person need water. That different." The old warrior spoke again, longer this time. The girl listened, then translated in segments. "My father say, I do test, walk alone 3 days, no food, no water, prove strong, prove ready." She paused. "It is the tradition of our people. When a young person comes of age, they go alone into the land. The land tests them. The land decides." She looked at him steadily. "I fall, hit head, lose path. Your water save life." Corbin felt the weight of 300 pairs of eyes on him. "I'm glad you're all right." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "You not afraid?" "I'm terrified," Corbin admitted, "but shooting or running won't change anything, so I'm standing here." Something almost like amusement moved across her face. She spoke to her father again. He nodded once, then walked back to his horse. "We watch. See if you speak truth or lie. See if you tell other white men where we are. See if you good or bad." "How long?"
asked Corbin. She didn't answer. She just turned her horse and rode back up the slope.
3 days passed. The warriors remained on the ridges like sentinels carved from stone, rotating positions with a quiet discipline that spoke of long practice. Smoke from their fires rose into the sky each evening. The Apache had used signal fires for generations to communicate across vast distances, a coded language written in smoke. Corbin tried to go about his work, but everything felt wrong. He fed the horses under watchful eyes. He repaired fence posts, knowing every movement was being studied. He drew water from the same well where he'd found the girl and wondered if they were counting each bucket. Sleep came in fragments. Every sound jerked him awake. On the 4th morning, he woke to find something had been left by his door, a bundle wrapped in hide. Inside, dried meat, dark and heavily salted, and a clay jar of cool water. He stared at it, trying to understand the message. The Apache were providing for him. Were they showing respect, or simply keeping him alive long enough to finish their judgment? Either way, he ate the meat. He was running low on his own supplies, and he couldn't exactly ride to town with 300 warriors blocking every route out of the valley. By the 5th day, the watching was wearing on him in ways he hadn't anticipated. He had always preferred solitude, but this was different. Solitude was a choice. This was exposure, every movement cataloged, every decision observed. He started talking to the horses just to hear a voice, even if it was only his own. On the 6th day, the girl came back. She rode down alone, without her father. She stopped at the same distance as before and dismounted. Up close, her height was even striking. She stood nearly as tall as Corbin, and Corbin was not a small man. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent, the kind that seemed to process everything at once. "You still here?" she said. "Didn't have much choice," Corbin replied. "You could run, at night, take horse." "Get killed before I made it a mile, no thanks." "You smart." It sounded like a compliment, but her tone was neutral, as if she were simply noting a fact. "Most white men run, get caught, get killed. You stay, you wait." "What else can I do?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to the well and looked down into it. "Deep," she said. "Doesn't run dry even in summer." She turned back to Corbin. "My people need water, too. This land, it was ours. Water flowed free. Game ran free." Her voice didn't rise in anger. It simply stated what was. Now, white men build fences, dig wells, take what was free. Corbin felt the weight of that. He'd bought this land legally, according to laws written by men who never asked the Apache whether they agreed. He'd known that somewhere in the back of his mind, but he'd never had to look it in the face before. "I don't want trouble," he said carefully. "Trouble already here," she replied. "Question is what you do with it." Before Corbin could answer, a sound cut through the morning air. A gunshot, distant but unmistakable. Then another, then a third.
The girl's head snapped toward the eastern ridge. The warriors were already moving, shifting positions with practiced speed. More shots echoed across the valley, coming from somewhere beyond the hills. The girl called out rapidly in Apache, and one of the nearest warriors shouted back. Her expression hardened into something Corbin had not seen on her face before. Not fear, but calculation, the kind that happens in the moment before a decision. "White men coming, many, with guns." "How many?" 20, maybe more. They hunt us."
For the first time, he saw something beyond neutrality in her eyes. It might have been accusation. It might have been sorrow. She mounted her horse in one fluid motion, no stirrup, no hesitation, the way Apache riders mounted, born into the saddle from childhood. They find you with us. They kill you too. They think you enemy. Where are you going? She didn't answer. She kicked her horse into motion and rode hard for the ridge. The warriors were already pulling back, disappearing into the hills like smoke absorbed by the desert sky. In less than 2 minutes, 300 warriors had vanished. Corbin stood alone in his yard as the sound of approaching horses grew louder. He had maybe 5 minutes. They came thundering down the eastern trail like a storm. Corbin counted 15 riders, maybe more behind them. They wore the rough clothes of settlers and frontiermen, canvas trousers, worn shirts, wide-brimmed hats stained with sweat and dust. Every man carried a rifle. Some had revolvers at their hips. Their horses were lathered and breathing hard. The lead rider spotted Corbin in the yard and raised a fist to slow the group. They pulled up 30 yards from the cabin, horses foaming. "You alone here?" the man called out. He was broad-shouldered with a thick beard and eyes that swept the valley constantly. "You see any Apache come through here?" A younger rider pushed forward, rifle already unslung. "We've been tracking a war party. Saw smoke signals yesterday. Trail led straight to this valley." Corbin's mind worked fast. He could lie, tell them the Apache had passed through and moved on. But these men were no fools. They'd seen the tracks, the camps, the signs of 300 warriors who had settled in for days of watching this ranch. The evidence was written in the earth all around him. "I've seen signs," Corbin said carefully, "but they're gone now." "Gone where?" "North, I think. Heard horses moving out about 20 minutes ago." It wasn't entirely a lie. He just didn't say how far north. The bearded man dismounted and walked closer. He looked at Corbin the way a man looks at something he's trying to figure out. "You seem awful calm for someone who just had hostiles camped on your doorstep." "Panic doesn't help anything." "Are you hiding something?" "Just trying to stay alive, same as anyone." The bearded man walked past him toward the cabin. "Mind if we look around? Water our horses?" Corbin stepped aside. He didn't have much choice. As the men spread out, Corbin caught movement on the western ridge, just a flicker, a shape that could have been rock or could have been a warrior watching from cover. The Apache had not left. They had simply pulled back far enough to avoid the fight. They were still out there, still watching. If these militiamen found them, the valley was going to run red. Inside the cabin, the bearded man turned and faced Corbin directly. "You're going to tell us exactly where those Apache went." It was not a request. It was an order. Outside, one of the men shouted, "Found fresh tracks, lots of them. They ain't far." The bearded man drew his revolver and stepped outside. The militia gathered at the eastern fence where the soft ground held the evidence clear as daylight. Dozens of unshod hoofprints moving in organized patterns. The tracks of warriors who had sat and watched this ranch for 6 long days. "They were camped here," the young rider said, turning his rifle toward Corbin. "You lied." "I said I saw signs. I didn't say they attacked me." "Why the hell not? You're a white settler. Why would they let you live?" Corbin had one chance to navigate this, one chance to keep these men from riding into the hills and starting a slaughter. "Maybe because I didn't give them a reason to kill me." "You sympathize with them?" The young rider's voice was sharp. "I sympathize with staying alive. They had 300 warriors on those ridges. If they wanted me dead, I'd be dead. They let me be, so I let them be." The bearded man's face went pale at the number. He looked around at his 15 men. The mathematics were clear. This wasn't bravery, it was suicide. Then why were they here? Another man asked. War parties don't just camp out for no reason. Corbin chose his words carefully. I helped one of theirs, a woman injured, gave her water when she needed it. They came to see what kind of man I was. Before more could be said, a sound carried across the valley. A call, high, piercing, not quite human, not quite animal, something in between, a signal. Every man froze. The call came again, echoing off the canyon walls, and then it was answered, from the north ridge, then the south, then the west, the valley filling with sound on all sides, surrounding them. They're still here, the young rider whispered. His rifle shook in his hands. The bearded man scanned the ridges, nothing visible, just rock and scrub and shadow, but the calls kept coming, closer now, tightening like a noose. Mount up, he ordered. We're leaving, now. We came here to fight. We came here to fight raiders, not 300 warriors on their own ground. Move. Within 30 seconds, they were all mounted, horses dancing with fear. The bearded man looked down at Corbin one last time. You're a fool if you stay here. Maybe, Corbin said, but it's still my home. They rode out hard, heading south. The thunder of hooves faded, swallowed by the desert wind. Then, the calls stopped. Silence settled over the valley, like dust after a storm.
Then movement on the ridge. The girl appeared first, riding down on her painted horse. Behind her, her father. Behind him, a dozen warriors. They rode slowly, deliberately. When they reached the valley floor, she dismounted and walked to Corbin. Her expression was unreadable. You not tell them where we are? No. You could. They would not kill us, not with those numbers. But you could make them happy, make them think you a good white man. I don't want anyone killed, Corbin said. She studied him for a long moment. Then she turned and spoke to her father. The old chief listened, then looked at Corbin with those black, measuring eyes. He said something brief, sharp, final. The girl translated. My father say, test is over, you pass. Corbin felt something loose in his chest. What happens now? The girl's expression shifted, not quite a smile, but the closest thing to one he'd seen on her face. Now we talk. The chief dismounted and walked toward Corbin's cabin without asking permission. It was not aggression. It was simply the manner of a man who had spent his life commanding respect without ever needing to demand it. The girl followed. Corbin brought up the rear, feeling oddly like a guest in his own home. Inside, the chief stood in the center of the small room, taking in the sparse furnishings with quiet attention. He said something to his daughter. He say you live simple, she translated, like warrior, no extra things. I don't need much. The chief pulled a chair from the table and sat. He gestured for Corbin to do the same. The girl remained standing, where she could see both men and the door. My name, she introduced herself properly for the first time. It means beautiful in our language. White men make jokes because I am tall, but my father say I am beautiful like mountain, strong, tall, unmovable. It's a good name, Corbin said. He looked at the chief. And your father? His name is not for you to say, she replied. Her tone was not hostile, simply matter of fact. He is chief. That is enough.
Part 9. What the chief said. The chief spoke, low, measured, each phrase carrying weight. The girl translated in segments, allowing him to finish his thoughts before converting them into English. You give water to me when I fall. You do not ask payment. You do not ask favor. You do not try to touch me or keep me. You give what I need and let me go. She paused as her father continued. This is not normal for white men.
They take, they demand, they hurt. But you just give. Corbin met the chief's eyes. She needed help, that's all. My father say his test was hard. 6 days watching, 6 days waiting to see if you run to town, if you tell soldiers where we camp, if you sell information for gold or safety. Her voice remained steady. You do none of these things. Armed men come looking for us. You could tell them, make them happy, make them think you a good white man who helps kill Apache. You do not. I don't want to kill anyone, Corbin said. But you also not want to die, the chief said, in English, just those 4 words, spoken carefully and with weight. Then he continued in Apache, and the girl translated. My father say, this land was once all Apache land. Water flowed free, game ran free. Then white men come with papers that say they own what cannot be owned. They put up fences, they dig wells. They say, this is mine, that is yours, you cannot pass here. The girl paused. But you are different. You have fence, yes. You have well, yes. But when a person needs water, you give. You do not ask if the person is Apache or white, if they are Christian or not. You just give water to the thirsty person. Anyone would do the same, Corbin said. No, the chief said, in English again, that single word placed with the precision of a stone dropped into still water. Most men see an Apache girl and think danger, think problem, think opportunity. You see a thirsty person. That is the difference. The chief stood and pushed the necklace across the table toward Corbin. You take, you wear, you are protected.
Part 10. The Choice. Corbin picked up the necklace. The beadwork was intricate, beautiful, the leather soft and carefully worked. He turned it in his hands. What does this mean for me, for my ranch? The girl and her father exchanged a look. Then she spoke without waiting for translation. It means you can live in peace. My people will not trouble you. We will watch over your land when you are gone. If other Apache come through, we tell them you are friend. She paused. But there is more. Those white men will come back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they will come. They want to fight Apache. They want revenge for things they think we do. If you wear this, if they see it, they will think you are traitor. They will not understand. They will want to hurt you too. The chief spoke one final time, short, definitive. My father say, choose carefully. Protection from us means danger from them. You cannot have both. Corbin held the necklace in his hands, feeling the weight of the choice. It was not just a piece of beadwork. It was a line drawn in the dust that he'd have to stand on one side of or the other. He thought about the militiamen, the bearded man's hard eyes, the young rider's suspicion. If they came back and found him wearing Apache symbols, they'd shoot first and ask questions later. He'd be branded a turncoat, a traitor to his own people. But what did that mean, really? His own people? White settlers who'd taken land through force and called it legal. Men who hunted human beings like animals and called it justice. Were those his people simply because they shared his skin color? He looked at the girl, standing tall and straight, waiting for his answer with the patience of someone who had already accepted whatever choice he made. She had been dying of thirst. He had given her water. That simple, that human. And now 300 warriors would leave him in peace because of it. Or he could refuse, keep his distance, try to stay neutral in a territory where neutrality was becoming impossible. That had been his plan when he came here. Isolation, peace through distance. But the world had found him anyway. Corbin put the necklace over his head. The beadwork settled against his chest, cool against his skin. I choose to live with honor, he said, same as I've been trying to do all along.
The chief's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, the way a mountain doesn't move, but the light on it changes with the hour. He stood and placed one hand briefly on Corbin's shoulder, a gesture that needed no translation. The girl spoke to her father, who nodded and replied. She turned back to Corbin. "My father say, you are brave or stupid, maybe both." This time she almost smiled. He also say, stupid brave men sometimes become legends. "I'm not looking to be a legend. I just want to live in peace." Peace takes more courage than war. Anybody can fight. It takes a special person to choose not to fight when everyone else wants blood. The chief moved toward the door. The girl followed, but paused at the threshold. "You have questions?" she asked. "A lot of them, but I guess they can wait." He thought for a moment. "That test you were doing? The 3 days alone with no food and water? Did you pass?" Her expression was unreadable. "I survive. That is pass, but not the way I plan. I fall. I need help. Some say that means I fail." "Then what do you say?" "I say I learn more falling than I would staying strong." She glanced at her father. "Sometimes the lesson comes from a place you don't expect. Sometimes strength is knowing when to accept help." The chief moved toward the door. The girl followed, but paused at the threshold. "My people leave now. We go north to the summer grounds. White men make it hard to stay anywhere long, always pushing, always taking." "Will you come back?" "Maybe, if we need water." She looked back at him one last time. "If we need to remind ourselves that not all white men are the same." She walked to her horse and mounted in one smooth motion. The warriors gathered behind the chief. Slowly, deliberately, they pulled back, leaving the valley, leaving the silence behind them. Corbin stood in his doorway and watched them go. The girl raised her hand once, a gesture that might have been farewell or acknowledgement. Then they were gone, disappearing into the hills like shadows at sunset.
The valley fell silent, the kind of silence that felt strange after 6 days of being watched. Corbin touched the necklace at his chest. The beadwork was warm from his skin now, no longer cool. He was protected. He was also marked. And somewhere to the south, 15 armed men were riding back to their settlement with stories about Apache warriors in these hills, stories that would spread, stories that would bring more men, more guns, more trouble. The peace he'd wanted felt further away than ever, but at least now he knew where he stood. 3 weeks passed. The valley settled into an uneasy quiet. Corbin worked his land, tended his animals, and kept the necklace visible on his chest. He didn't hide it, didn't take it off. If trouble was coming, he'd meet it on his own terms. The trouble came on a Tuesday morning. Dust rose on the southern trail. The bearded militia leader was back, with 8 men this time, fewer but better armed. They rode straight to the ranch and formed a half circle around the yard, rifles ready. "Heard rumors," the bearded man called out. "Heard a rancher out here's been trading with the enemy." His eyes locked on the necklace. Guess the rumors were true. "I'm not trading with anyone. I'm living in peace." "That's Apache beadwork. You're wearing their colors. That makes you one of them." "It makes me someone they won't kill," Corbin replied. "Seems like a practical choice in hostile territory." "It makes you a traitor." The bearded man dismounted slowly, hand near his revolver. "We came here to give you a chance to explain yourself." "You want to know why I'm wearing this? Because I gave water to a dying girl, and it turns out her father commands 300 warriors. They tested me for 6 days. I passed. They offered protection. I accepted. That's the whole story."
You think that makes you special, different from the rest of us trying to survive out here? No, said Corbin, I think it makes me smart. You came here hunting Apache. How many did you kill? The question hung in the air. No one answered. That's what I thought. You rode in looking for a fight and found an army instead. You turned back 'cause you knew you'd lose. I made a different choice. I chose not to fight at all. Coward's choice, the young rider spat. Maybe, said Corbin, but I'm alive. My ranch is standing, and I can sleep at night knowing I didn't start a war that would get good men killed on both sides. The bearded man studied him for a long moment. You really think you can stay neutral in this? I don't think I can stay neutral. I think I already picked a side. I picked a side that doesn't want bloodshed. If that makes me an enemy to you, then shoot me now and get it over with. He spread his arms wide, making himself an open target. The necklace hung visible on his chest, blue and white beads catching the morning sun. No one moved. The horses shifted nervously. A hawk called overhead. Finally, the bearded man shook his head. You're a damn fool, Thorn, but you're an honest one. He turned to his men. Mount up, we're wasting time here. We're just letting him go? He ain't hurting anyone, and if the Apache want to leave him alone, that's their business. We got real problems to deal with. Settlers getting raided, families needing protection. This man ain't one of them problems. He swung back into his saddle and looked down at Corbin one last time. Don't expect us to come running if you need help. You made your choice. Live with it. I intend to, Corbin said. They rode out slower this time. The young rider looked back once with something between anger and confusion. Then they were gone, leaving dust settling in the morning air.
Epilogue. The water still flows. Corbin stood alone in his yard. The valley was empty again. No warriors on the ridges, no militia on the trails. Just him, his ranch, and the choice he'd made. He walked to the well and drew up a bucket of water, cold, clear, untouched by the heat of the day. He poured it into the trough for the horses, watching it splash and settle. The sound of it, simple, clean, generous, was the same sound it always made. That evening, as the sun dipped toward the western hills, he saw movement on the ridge. A single rider, tall and straight in the saddle. The girl sat watching from a distance, making sure he'd survived the confrontation. When she saw him looking, she raised one hand in acknowledgement. Then she turned her horse and disappeared into the gathering shadows. Corbin touched the necklace at his chest. It had cost him the trust of men who shared his skin color, but earned him something more valuable, genuine peace in a land where peace was as rare as rain. He went inside, lit a lamp against the coming dark, and sat down to the simple meal he'd prepared. Outside, the valley stretched silent under the first stars. No armies watching, no men hunting, just land and sky, and the quiet knowledge that sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is choose not to fight. His ranch would stand, the water would flow, and when thirsty travelers came through, Apache or white, friend or stranger, he would offer them a drink and let them be on their way. It wasn't much of a legacy, but it was honest. And in a territory torn by violence and fear, where men on every side were choosing sides, loading rifles, and deciding who was human and who was not, honesty was worth more than gold. Corbin Thorn had given water to a girl who needed it. In return, he'd found something he hadn't known he was looking for, a way to live with honor in a land where honor was becoming extinct. The choice had been simple, the consequences were hard, but the water was cold and clear, and the land did not care about the arguments of men.
It only asked, as it always had, whether you were willing to share what it gave you. Corbin Thorne was willing. That was enough.